So here's a question for you. Would you benefit from ongoing support to improve your sales conversations and ultimately close more business? The Sales Maven Society offers you daily support for your urgent sales questions, an extensive library of bite-sized trainings to hone your selling skills, and monthly live coaching calls where you receive individualized coaching from me specific to your business so that you're able to remove any bottlenecks in your sales process. This is the most robust sales coaching program around for an incredible value of only $147 a month. And you can join now for your first month for only $47. You get access to absolutely everything, including the live coaching calls with me. Come check it out and see if this is the place for you to really elevate your business to the next level. You can do this by going to yoursalesmaven.com/society, hit the join now button. And then when it takes you to that page, enter this code, the number 4, the number 7, and the word trial, TRIAL. So 47 trial, all one word, and you'll be a member. I can't wait to see you in there. Now, here's the podcast.
Do sales conversations make you feel awkward or pushy? It's time to ditch the outdated salesy strategies. Your guide, Nikki Roush, will show you how to combine kindness with selling skills to meet your prospects where they are, and in the process, how to up-level your influence and income. Learn how to earn business easily and effortlessly. Here's Nikki.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to the Sales Maven Show. I'm your host, Nikki Roush. Today's episode is part of the Mastering Excellence series. This concept comes from my background in neuro-linguistic programming, where we learn that there is a structure to excellence. And once you understand the structure of how somebody is getting exceptional results in their own life or business, you can apply that same structure to your life so you can have similar results as well. So today's guest, I'm very excited, is Michael Roderick. Let me tell you about Michael. He is the CEO of Small Pond Enterprises, which helps thoughtful givers become thought leaders by making their brands referable, their messaging memorable, and their ideas unforgettable. He is also the host of the podcast Access to Anyone, which shows how you can get to know anyone you want in business and in life using time-tested relationship building principles. Michael's unique methodology comes from his own experience of going from being a high school English teacher to a Broadway producer in under 2 years. Michael, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here and have this conversation. We got to know each other through a mutual friend, through Kara Steinman. She introduced us. Gosh, it's been a while. I can't actually even remember how long it's been.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people that is the case. I feel like we've sort of hit this really interesting. I think because of everything that had sort of happened with the pandemic, there's been sort of this shift in the way that we all think about time, where we'll sort of be like, oh yeah, that was like a couple months ago, but it could have been a year, right?
Yes.
Like, it's that kind of thing. I think that has sort of started to happen. But I do think it was a number of months back. I do think we're looking at maybe like 5 or 6 months back.
That's what I was thinking
when we
too.
First got connected.
Yeah, I was thinking, was it before? I couldn't remember if it was before the end of the year or right after the new year, but it feels like it was a while back. Anyway, I'm just so excited to have this conversation with you. And I know from some of our conversation that, you know, one of your really sweet spots is that you really understand how to make connections. And I think a lot of times people have people that they want to get to know, but they're not really sure how to go about it. So I thought it would be fun to have this conversation with you and kind of lead you through the questions so we could start to understand structure. And as you comment on things, I'll probably like reference back to the listener some of the things that I'm hearing from a structure standpoint. But you get to just be you and be your perfect self, and we'll see where we go.
That sounds fantastic.
All right. So the first question I always like to ask is, if I got to stand in for you for a day, so I get to be Michael for the day, what do I have to think or how do I have to think when I have somebody I've identified that I really want to get to know in business?
Sure. So I guess the thing, and it's really interesting and kind of ironic that the show that the show that I've run is called Access to Anyone, because I actually believe that when we think about connecting with somebody or getting to know someone, we think about it from the point of access. And I think that it's actually not effective to think about it from the point of access. It's
Mm,
much more effective to think about it from the point of interest. So, how do I create interest so that whoever this person is wants to communicate with me? And I think that a lot of the time, whenever I'm thinking about that aspect, if there's somebody new, if there's somebody that I haven't connected with yet, I'm always thinking, okay, what would be interesting to this person? What would be something that they haven't heard before or seen before? And most importantly, is there a way that I can create enough curiosity, especially if it's in some kind of cold outreach or if there is some sort of like we don't really know each other that well? Is
mhm.
there anything that I can do to create such curiosity that they feel like they just need to respond to what I've sort of sent out?
I love that. Well, of course, I love curiosity because I teach that in business too. I think it's
Hmm.
kind of a missed skill oftentimes, or it's a skill that most people don't really ever learn. Like,
Yeah,
how do you create curiosity? So I'm going to ask you that question
yeah,
as a follow up.
sure.
So, what are some of your behaviors, or what are some of the things that you do to create curiosity for that person?
Yeah. So probably the easiest one that I feel is just very, very teachable
Hmm.
is what I will often sort of refer to as the Breaking Bad technique. And if you've ever seen the TV show Breaking Bad, the writers of that show, they always created a scene at the opening of the show that basically had no payoff until you got to either the middle of the show or sometimes later on in the show. So there would be this scene, and you were just like, I don't know why this character is in this space, or I don't know why this toy is floating in a pool or whatever it was.
Hmm.
And then you'd find out significantly later, right? And the reason why, just to give you a little bit of sort of behind the scenes kind of stuff, is that shows get their ratings only if people have watched them to the middle or beyond. So if we click off pretty much like right away after a show happens, those ratings don't count. So the writers built in this curiosity dynamic where they would give you something that you were like, I don't know how that thing's going to pay off. So you'd actually watch it to the middle or beyond. And
Mm,
it was one of the things that made the show very, very successful.
hmm.
So going back to that, 9 times out of 10, when we reach out to somebody, we give them everything they need to say yes or no. We
Hmm.
basically are like, here's my pitch, here's my process, here's all the things, here's everything I can do for you, here's my
Yeah.
bio, all of this other stuff. And the thing that we want to do is we want to use the Breaking Bad effect. We want to say something that makes them super curious and gets them to the point where they want to come back to us. So sometimes that can be we actually leave something out, right? So if I were to reach out to somebody and say, I wanted to reach out because I know that you're working in the field of NLP,
Hmm.
and I found this fascinating study that deals with NLP and Hollywood films. Just curious, if you're curious about it, would love to talk to you more. Boom.
I'd be so in.
Right.
You
And
already
you're
got
like,
me.
you're right. And that's the thing. It's like the mistake that we make when we do any kind of outreach, especially now, is we give people everything. And it's so easy for them to either say yes or no. And most people are overwhelmed with information. So they're going to say no. But if we're just like, here's something that makes you kind of curious, or here's something that makes you kind of interesting, it will really work. And this works even beyond just cold outreach, because if I'm trying to introduce two people, right? If I don't make the other person on the other side curious about the person that I'm making the intro to, then again, they can just be like, yes or no. But if they're like, that person sounds kind of fascinating, I really want to know more about what they do, then they're much more likely to say, yes, I want that intro. So like, let's just say somebody has a very specific process that they're using. And I would say something along the lines of, I'd love for you to meet this person, and they have a completely new way of looking at sales, something that I have never seen before. And it's fascinating because it has to do with the world of product creation. So like when people are developing products, but like, it's just fascinating, really, really interesting stuff. Would you want to have them on your show? And like, what does that do? Right? It like gets them in that place of like, I need to know who that person is. And a very easy way to do this, I always tell folks this: write out the whole thing, right? Like come up with whatever it is, and then just literally take stuff out. So write out your description of the whole thing and then just take a bunch of stuff out. And then instantly you're left with, okay, well, there's a gap here. And then how might I describe that gap in one sentence? How might I tease that gap and get that person to be like, I need to know what that thing is.
Okay. All right. So I'm just going to comment on a few things here that you said. So much already. That's so great. So first, this idea is thinking about creating interest for the other person. And that's going to come from creating curiosity and using the Breaking Bad technique where you don't give it all. Like there has to be a payoff, but you've got to do something at the beginning that makes them go like, yes, tell me more, or I want to engage. So I love that so much. And then this idea of like leaving something out and being prepared and writing out the whole thing first and really kind of asking yourself these questions. Have I created curiosity? Did I leave something out that would spur this kind of next part of the conversation? So did I get that right
exactly.
so far? Okay,
yeah,
good.
No, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's my next question for you. When you think about this idea of that there's somebody you've identified that you want to get to know, what are your goals in addition to these things that you've already given us? Like, what's the goal for you?
Sure. So I'm always, thinking about it from the standpoint of the folks sort of within my world, and basically how can that sort of, I like to think about a network like an ecosystem where it's all sort of supporting each other. So everybody that I meet is going to usually tell me something that they could use help with or that they could use support with. So when I'm coming to another individual, I'm sort of seeing the world through their eyes, right? And I have this model I call the OCG framework. And basically, it's like if somebody comes to me and offers me something and I can do something with it, somebody's like, oh, we'd love to have you speak at this, event or whatever, and it really fits within what I do, then that's an opportunity. And I can take that opportunity and do something with that opportunity. But if they come to me and they're like, we'd love for you to speak on, how to use TikTok or something that I'm, not even close to, right? Then I would not see that as an opportunity. It's a coincidence. It's a coincidence that they found me, that they sort of thought about me. And what I can do with that coincidence is I can turn it into a gift for someone else. So I can ask myself, who else within my circle would be a good speaker who's maybe done something with TikTok where I'm like, that would be kind of the perfect speaker. So when I'm meeting with somebody, I'm kind of approaching it from two angles. One is I want to have an understanding of them and sort of like what they're searching for. But while they're sharing who they are and what they're about, I'm also in the same process sort of thinking through, okay, based on what they're telling me, who else would be able to sort of fill in that gap? And the thing that I often say about this is that the keys to all the doors we need open are in other people's pockets. So everything that we've sort of struggled with, somebody else has overcome. So like anytime we're kind of in this place of like, how do I figure this out? Like, what do I do? There are other people who have already been through it, have developed frameworks around it, have sort of thought through it. So if I can introduce somebody to that other person, or if I can share with them a resource or let them know about somebody else's kind of ideas or concepts, then there's a pretty good chance that I can help sort of solve that problem, right? And same like opportunity, coincidence, gift, same type of thing. If I'm sharing the work that I do and they're sharing with me that they have, I call it the target problem, where basically if you really think about a problem and you give it a specific name, in my case, the one that comes up most for the clients I have is shoemaker's kid syndrome, where basically they're very good at serving the client and doing the work for the client, but they have a lot of trouble packaging themselves. And in some cases, even if they're like a great marketer and they sell really well, or they help their clients sell their stuff really well, they don't sell themselves as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I describe that, basically somebody's either saying, that's me and I want to work with you, or they're saying, that's not me, that might be my friend or that might be my colleague, right? So the thing is, there might be an opportunity to work together in that interaction when they hear my target problem. But if there's not an opportunity to work together and it is basically just coincidence that we're connecting through different friends, et cetera, then there's probably a gift I can give, right? Like there's probably something that's going to support them and help them in some way if the service that I have or if the things that I do are not going to sort of fit that category.
Wow. Again, that was another little masterclass right there. So I'm obsessed now with this OCG framework. That was brilliant. Opportunity, coincidence, and gift. And then this idea of that the keys that you need are in other people's pockets. It made me think of, I've seen this a few times on social media where they give the teacher who fills up a hallway in a school of balloons, and each balloon has a kid's name on it. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I've heard about this one.
And they give them like 5 minutes to find the balloon with their name, and and it's just total chaos. It doesn't happen. And then they tell the kids instead, now take a balloon with somebody else's name on it and take it to them. And in that like 5 minutes, everybody's got their balloon. Yep. And so when you said that the keys in other people's pockets, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the balloon analogy. And it's so brilliant. There's so much gold in that. This idea of like, the keys that you need are in somebody else's pocket, or the key that somebody else needs is in somebody else's pocket. So how can you make that connection for them? I love that so much. All right.
Thank you.
So the follow-up question is then, how do you know you're achieving the goal?
So I feel like you're achieving the goal if the conversation is flowing and everybody's sort of, so I kind of look at meetings in 3 categories. And the top category is that there's just this like flow in the meeting. You're having a great time. You're really getting to know each other. You're helping each other out. You're supporting each other in sort of different ways. You've got ideas for each other. It just feels like everything's sort of activated, right? And then there's the second tier, which is more, I call it the two-way pitch meeting. And it's kind of the standard for any sort of networking teaching that's out there, where basically the person's like, okay, pitch what your service is and tell the other person sort of what you're looking for, and then have them pitch what their service is and say like, what's a good referral for you, and like all those different types of things. And the problem that I find with the two-way pitch meeting is that the two-way pitch meeting is entirely focused on the professional, and it's focused on this like transactional sort of trade, right? Yeah. So it's actually not generative in terms of conversation, because if the trade doesn't work, right? Like if either I tell you that my price point is different than your price point, or if I tell you that my offer doesn't really kind of like match what your clients would be interested in, right? We're dead in the water. right? And
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
not generative. It's this like transactional sort of back and forth. But that is not as bad as the bottom tier, which I call the steamroller meeting. And we've all had the steamroller meeting where you get on the call and they spend the entire time basically trying to sell you something that you do not want, right? Like they just
Or
kind of like
need. Yeah.
lay out like all the value that they're providing you, or I can't tell you the number of times where the steamroller meeting happened the second that somebody opened their conversation with, I just want to let you know that my goal during these 30 minutes is to give you the most value possible. I'm like, red flag, red flag. It just like goes, all these types of things, because it's the classic scenario of, so I have a big issue with how can I help you as an opener, right?
Yeah.
And the reason why is that you don't know me yet. So I'm already questioning, like, what level of trust is there really in existence if you're literally like let me throw my network at you before you even know what I do,
Yes.
right? But in addition to that, it puts the other person in a lower position. It's when you're like opening with how can I help you, it's like I'm like, yeah, I've got all the things and you don't, I'll just do whatever you need to do. It's just such a hard, like rough dynamic. So what I always talk about is the fact that you want to get to know the person first and understand them, and then you won't even have to ask how can I help you, because as long as you're actually listening, you're going to basically be able to say, oh, here's how I can help. I know exactly. You've just communicated to me what the challenge is or what the issue is that you're going through, or you've just communicated to me what you love and what you're excited about. So here's something that I think is going to be super useful for you. Here's something that I think is going to be great. And it's that proactive dynamic that just like it completely changes your conversations. I would say if 90% of folks just decided to be more proactive in their conversations, in listening to what people actually are talking about and what they actually need, most of the problems would be taken care of. It's that we spend so much time being reactive and sort of waiting and trying to see and like all this other stuff, rather than just being like, okay, I've heard something. I think there's a way that I can help. I'm going to share that way that I think I can help, or I'm going to make that intro, or I'm going to support somebody, in some capacity based on the things that I'm hearing.
I love that. In NLP, there's the 4 levels of listening, and like the second level up is known as conversational listening. And I always compare it to it's like on the schoolyard when you used to play jump rope, where you're just like waiting for your chance to jump in. And those are the worst conversations to me, when you feel the person is just waiting for their opportunity to speak. Like, okay, yes, I'm jumping in here so that I can speak now because you said that thing. And to me, that really truly is it's not a good form of listening when you're just waiting for your chance to jump in.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. And when I was in theater, that was one of the biggest things that I'd have to work with actors when I was directing, because actors would basically they'd memorize like their lines, right? And they'd sit there kind of waiting for their next line, and the scene just fell flat. So you always had to be like, listen, like, don't wait for your next line. Just actually listen to what the other person's saying. And trust me, that line's going to come. You're going to know sort of what to say. And I think the thing is, we don't practice active listening enough, right?
Yeah.
We're constantly in that place of, well, what do I say next? And sort of, how do I handle this? And I think, honestly, a lot of that comes from all of the scripts that people get given, and they're told, like, say this or do it this way. So now they're waiting to say this thing, and they're not actually listening to the other person. They're just going on whatever the next line is of the script, thinking that that's what's going to give them the success. And your success comes from being able to listen and really being able to support. And a lot of people will ask me about the Broadway producing, right? They're like, how did you go from being a high school English teacher to becoming a Broadway producer in under 2 years? And the answer is very, very simple. I identified other producers who were on their way up and said, how do I make them more successful? How do I become part of that success story? And when that happens, and you're basically just, helping others become successful, and you let them know what you're trying to do and what you're interested in, they'll invite you to do other things. But that's the other really important thing. And I think this is so, so important. And I talk about this, I call this the giver's fix, right? So every time we give and we support others, we get this rush. It's like a chemical. Some say it's oxytocin, some say it's dopamine, but regardless, there's a rush whenever we give. And there is not that same good feeling or rush when it comes to asking. So what happens is people who love to give and support others, they get hooked just like an addict on that giving. And they basically, just like an addict, keep seeking the next high of giving. And then they never ask for what they need. So what ends up happening is they get so hooked on trying to get the next high of like, I'm going to help this person, I'm going to help this person, I'm going to help this person. And they never let people know what it is that they need. And that balance is so, so important. And I see this all the time. And it's really because you see so much education around just give and give and give, and the universe will provide and everything will work out. And the thing that I just want the world to know is that it doesn't matter if you're in the trenches if nobody knows you're down there.
Amen.
Got to let people know what you actually need. If you're out there giving and supporting and sort of helping everybody else, like, you got to let them know what you need. If you don't do that, everybody in your network is going to believe that you have no needs. They're going to think, well, how could this person be so magnanimous and so giving and so generous if they weren't doing fantastic? And I can't tell you the number of givers that I meet that they are bleeding. They are absolutely bleeding. And their network doesn't know. The network thinks that they are surrounded in cash when they're surrounded in blood.
Okay, that just gave me the chills. That was so impactful. And I really hope that this will touch somebody in some way. And I want to just ask you about this because there's a little bit of a shift. So I will say I'm addicted to the giver's fix for sure, and have been. And it wasn't until my 30s when somebody pulled me aside. Somebody had offered to do like something really incredible for me, and I couldn't accept it. And somebody finally pulled me aside and said, you're actually robbing this person of having the experience of what it feels like to do something so generous for another person. Like, it's actually a gift for them too.
Yeah.
And you're stealing that away. And I felt a lot of shame around it. And then I did go back to the person and accepted this incredibly generous offer.
Yeah.
It was hard. It was so hard for me to do, but it is something that I've carried with me. And so now when somebody offers to do something, my instinct is always to say, no, I'm fine. Right. Like, cause I'm I will bleed and let everybody think everything's fine. But I don't want to rob people of having that experience of what it is like to have the fix. Right.
Yep.
Like, you don't want to just feed I don't want to be the taker all the time from somebody who's just the giver because they could be bleeding. And I don't want that. Right.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I just want to comment on that because I think it's so important. And I see this a ton with entrepreneurs, the giver fix. Are you ready to up-level your sales game? Well, here is a gift for you. It is the Mastering the Sales Conversation mini training. This training gives you my proven step-by-step approach to sales so that you can go from that overwhelmed and intimidated approach that you have to sales to feeling confident and leading a conversation so that you easily guide somebody to hiring you. You can get it right now by going to yoursalesmaven.com/mastering. This is my gift to you. Go grab it now.
100%. And it comes from this place of we have to be very, very careful of believing in formulas that people give us as opposed to finding frameworks that help us think differently. And I think
Say
that
that again. Would you?
sure,
Yeah.
we have to be very, very careful of basically believing in formulas and using those formulas rather than finding frameworks that help us think differently. And
Oh, that's so
in
good.
the entrepreneurship world and in the marketing world, sort of in general, what ends up happening is the way that somebody becomes successful very often in marketing is that they will present something as the one thing. They will present something as the one thing, and the market, there will be a certain portion of the market that is willing to believe that it is the one thing. And I refer to this as the aspirational market. The aspirational market is the masses that believe that there is one thing, a silver bullet that will save them.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, formulas really hit like that nerve for people.
Mm-hmm.
Because if somebody's like, this is the one thing, all you have to do is follow this script. All you have to do is do this, this, and then you're going to be successful. This is going to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is a formula works for whoever created that formula, not because of the formula, but because of the context in which that formula has been implemented. It's the environment that they have that we never see. And I was talking about this with somebody the other day because they were talking about the fact that all of the arguments that people were making with them was around the idea of consistency.
Mm-hmm.
And that if you are consistent, then you will be successful. And if you are just putting your content out every day, then you're going to be successful and you're going to really knock it out of the park and all these different types of things. And they were saying I was so consistent and it didn't work. It didn't go sort of to this particular level. And I said, well, but how many people were amplifying that message that you had and that you were putting out consistently? Like, were there people actually, getting that message out there, or were you just showing it over and over and over again to the same audience? And we sort of came to the conclusion that this person who was sharing this value of consistency was not sharing the fact that they had a distribution channel and they were seeking larger distribution channels to basically grow that brand. But it's so easy in the marketing world to say it's one thing because aspirational markets are always larger than excellence markets. An aspirational market is the masses who are willing to believe whatever, one trick will work.
Mm-hmm.
Once we kind of pass that point of aspiration and we move into an excellence market, we don't believe the overblown claims anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We stop buying into the idea that we're going to double our income overnight or whatever the
Yep.
thing is that somebody's telling us. And we start to say, okay, what are the specific things that you're telling me I can do? Oh, you can tell me how to sort of develop an offer or develop, this type of thing. So the thing is, if we seek out frameworks, right? If we find people who basically are like, this is how I think, and I would love for you to use this framework to think in this particular way, well, then we can bring ourselves to the work and we're not shackled by that formula. So going back to what I was saying with the giving, the formula that is in every book around giving and networking that gets presented is give without expectation of return. And the law of reciprocity will work. And you'll either be paid back by the universe or you'll be paid back by the person that you're talking to. And it is presented as a formula. But the thing that everybody forgets about is that reciprocity is probably about as nuanced as you can possibly get. If I do something for you, and I think about this in the context of two things. Everybody has a reciprocity impulse and everybody has a reciprocity timeline. So I'll start with the reciprocity impulse. Basically, if I have had lots of strife and trouble and challenges in my life, and people have supported me and helped me, then I probably have a very, very strong reciprocity impulse. It's probably really hard for me to receive something because I've seen what it's like when somebody sort of supports and helps and all these different types of things. And I'm like, I need to give back. I need to give back. But if I grew up in an environment where I was just always getting, and I never really kind of had that, I never really had anybody come and sort of, then I might just be in a place of sort of expectation and think, well, people just do things for me. And that's
yes.
And the thing is, that doesn't make the other person a bad person. I think that's the other thing that we get so caught up in is like, oh, because they didn't ask me about me, they're a jerk. No, they're not. They're conditioned to not ask you about you. That's how they grew up.
Yes.
That's what their life is, right? So there's the reciprocity impulse, which can completely confuse folks. And then there's the reciprocity timeline. And the thing is, there are people who they have very short reciprocity timelines where they just feel like if somebody's doing something for them, they're like on a set timer to try and give something back. And then there are other people who maybe they've been burned before, they've had some issues where like they did something for somebody and then that person came back and asked for this like massive thing, so they're like kind of freaked out about it. So they literally wait sometimes months or even years to basically do something for the other person because they're trying to suss out, like, do I trust this person? Do I want to open up my network to them? Do I want to do, these things to sort of help that person out? And the thing is, if you are feeling like you're not getting back from the giving that you're doing, it doesn't mean that giving is not working and that reciprocity is broken or any of those different types of things. It means that you're dealing with different individuals who have different reciprocity impulses and different reciprocity timelines. And most likely, going back to what we were talking about before, you have not shared effectively what it is that you need so that they have an understanding that you have needs.
Again, I feel like that was just a little masterclass that you gave there, Michael. Thank you so much. So I want to comment on a few things because I will say I'm feeling like you're blowing my mind every single time you go into a new thing. I want to jump back to this idea of what you talked about with formulas versus frameworks. I've never actually heard it put the way that you just put it. And so I just want to say that was a profoundly impactful piece for me because I truly believe in frameworks and I have a framework of how I teach the sales process. And so, and I've struggled with this idea of scripts for many years too, because I know that you can't say to somebody, you say this, the client's then going to say that, and then you say this next thing, because that's not how conversation works.
Exactly.
So I do now, I've given up and I do have some script stuff that I'll give to people, but it isn't a back and forth, like you say this because they say that. And it's like, no, I'm teaching people how to have a structure to a conversation so that they can show up and be themselves. Cause I don't think sales works otherwise. So I thought that part was incredible. And then this idea of reciprocity, the impulse and the timeline, and are you communicating your needs? And also, I do think reciprocity works. And with anything, there should be some structure, right? Yeah. So that again was incredibly profound. And this was, I remember this from our very first conversation where I was just like, oh my gosh, every time you say something, I'm just sitting there going like, yes. Like, when you talk, it makes so much sense to me. It just resonates at a really deep level. So thank you.
Sure.
All right. So I'm going to ask you maybe just a couple more questions here.
Sure.
How do you know that it's time for you to pay attention to, okay, I want to do these things to really get to know somebody in business. So how do you, like, what are those indicators for you?
So a lot of the time, at least for me, I'm looking at things from the standpoint of, am I fascinated with their brain? I think that's the thing. For me, that's the biggest thing. So like I have certain friends and colleagues who after one meeting, I've been like, we need to hang out more. Right. And like, we need to spend more time together, because I'm fascinated with the way that they think.
Yeah.
And I think that we don't do this enough, where basically we find people who we're interested in the way that they think, and we spend more time with those people. I think that the biggest problem that we encounter when it comes to relationship building is that we focus too much on relationship acquisition and not enough on relationship retention, right? And that again comes from a lot of the teachings. You know, the idea is like, get to know as many people as possible, have a big network, all these different types of things. But relationships are built over time.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that I was writing about this the other day, because I was talking about referrals, and this is probably the only formula I'll ever sort of share, you know, because I
Okay.
am a frameworks guy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But consistency plus intention equals trust. So if you are consistent and intentional, and you are spending time developing relationships and getting to know somebody, and you're spending more and more time with them over time, that trust just builds and builds and builds.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, you know, when I was writing about it, I was writing about it in the context of referrals, because basically the mistake that I see a lot of people make is that they do that relationship acquisition side of things with referrals, as opposed to being like, okay, who are the people that I know we should know each other more, and we should continue to think about ways to collaborate, because we're probably going to be able to make like a bigger pie for everybody, and spend that time being consistent about what are the things that we're doing, what are the things that I'm inviting them to, what are the things that we're going to, what are the things we're working on together, and build that over time, because then the person feels pretty good about referring you, because they
Mm-hmm.
know you now, and they've seen your brain, and they've seen the way that you think, and they're just like, I trust that if I send somebody to you and they spend money, they're going to feel really good about the money that they spent. And I think that that's the thing we forget about. We think of referrals in this context of like, let me just like send a referral, but
Mm-hmm.
really people send referrals and give referrals because they're thinking to themselves, this person is going to do so much for my friend, and or my colleague, or the person that I want to help, and I am giving a gift to that person. And we can't get to that point where we're seen as a gift in terms of an introduction if we just kind of know the person in a cursory way. Now, it's not
Mm-hmm.
that it doesn't happen, right?
Yeah.
But if you want consistency, like if you want lots of referrals, if you want people to keep sending you things over and over and over again, then there needs to be that dynamic of they know you, they understand you, they've seen your brain, and they feel good about making those intros and connecting you to those people and putting you in those rooms.
Mm. I love this. So the focus shouldn't just be on acquisition. It should really be on retention when you're
Mm.
thinking about the relationship. And this idea of consistency plus intention is really where the trust comes in. That's
Yep.
really beautiful too. I love that so much. All right. So here's always kind of I'm just going to ask the question before I give any context to it. How do you know to stop? When is it time to stop?
Mm. Are you thinking, is that in the context of you're having a conversation and you want to stop, or you're sort of in the building process of like getting to know people, and you like, when do you sort of say like, okay, let me just actually like work with what I have, as opposed to sort of doing more of the acquisition?
I'd really love for you to answer the question, whichever feels more on point to you.
Yeah.
Really, we're just digging into your brain because I
Yeah.
love the
Yeah.
way you think.
Yeah. So I think that I'll talk about it from the angle of the conversation, and sort of
Okay.
like, where does where does the conversation stop?
Okay.
I think that if you're feeling like it's got a really good flow, and you're enjoying the time that you're spending with the person, like I always think like it's worth it for you to kind of do that litmus test for yourself. And I think any meeting that you have, any connection that you have, you always want to ask yourself, am I enjoying this? Because if you're not, then doing any kind of follow up and spending a bunch of time sort of get most of the time your first impression is right. Like it's very,
Mm.
very rare that you're off. Now, every once in a while, yes, somebody's going to have an off day, but you're going to have a pretty good sense in that meeting if this is somebody that I need to spend more time with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if you feel like that isn't the case and you're not enjoying yourself, I think you can just end the meeting with, I really, great to meet you. We'll keep, I'll keep you in mind for XYZ or whatever the thing is, and then not be as sort of proactive, with the follow up, right? Like with
Mm-hmm.
with that type of dynamic. And I used to have conversations with people all the time about this with like events, right? Because you'll go to an event and you're going to get like dozens of cards and intros and all these stuff. But you want to ask yourself, okay, out of that batch of folks who I connected with, who did I really connect with? Who did I feel really, really good about? And, with those people, you ask them for the meeting. Like you ask them if they want to, if they want to connect. With the
Mm-hmm.
others, you just say, hey, it was nice meeting you.
Yeah.
Because if they're interested in going further with you, they'll let you know. They'll tell you, right? But just offering, I think biggest mistake I made at the very, very beginning was this aspect of like taking every meeting, right? Where you're just like, okay, I'm gonna just like take all of these meetings. And I would have instances where I would literally be at a coffee shop from 8 in the morning till sometimes like close to 8 at night. And it would be like a, you know, rolling revolving door, right?
Yeah.
Like
Revolving door.
everybody's
Yeah.
just like coming in and going out and taking
Yeah.
all these meetings. And the thing that was a problem with that was there was no curation of that. So it would be like steamroller meeting, good meeting, two-way pitch, two-way pitch, two-way pitch, good meeting. And by the end, I would just be completely exhausted, have all of these follow-ups that I was like, I'm not even sure like what to do with sort of any of this stuff. And I remember the thing that saved me and really, really helped me was I went on a meeting diet where basically I was like, okay, I'm going to be very, very thoughtful about how many meetings I have. And I'm going to be very, very thoughtful about which meetings I have. And I started doing things where I would really kind of like, I wouldn't just take the meeting. I would sometimes, if somebody reached out, I would ask them a bunch of questions before we even had the meeting.
Mm.
And I would sort of suss out, like, does this make sense? And it was that curating piece that was the most important thing that I learned. And I actually learned this, like, I actually became aware of this because I met with this really, really big investor one time when I was working in theater. And I thought I was like, just being a hot, little number because I was like, here's all the people that I can introduce you to. And I'm like going out, like, to, share, like, waving that connector flag kind of thing. And I'll never forget, he stopped me in the middle of my little diatribe. And he basically said, listen, if you introduce me to a bunch of people that are not going to be helpful, he's like, I want you to lose my number. He's like, you have got to clean your pipeline. He's like, you have got to clean your pipeline. He's like, I only want to meet the people who are going to actually help me with what I'm trying to do. I don't need more like he went off, right?
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I took that to heart. And to this day, curating is at the absolute top of everything I do. Whether it be clients I decide to work with, whether it be meetings I decide to take, podcasts I decide to do, everything is curated. Where basically I ask myself, do I feel like I really connect with this person? Do I feel like this is going to make sense? And how do I feel about the interaction, right? Like, how do I feel about the interaction? And I think that that's the thing. It's like, trust your gut. in these interactions, and don't be afraid to curate. I think that's the thing. Even if you're a beginner,
Yeah.
because that's another one of those like ridiculous like formulas that gets put out, especially in the entertainment world. It's like, well, I took every meeting. I took every single meeting and eventually it worked out. You don't have to. You don't have to curate. Think about what makes the most sense for me right now. You have a finite amount of time. Do not waste it by overburdening yourself with meetings that don't necessarily go anywhere or help you in what you're trying to do. And I mean, it really does go back to that giver's fix scenario where it's like sometimes we feel bad about not taking a meeting or having the conversation, but it's like we've got to honor ourselves when it comes to that. We cannot just spread ourselves so thin in taking meetings and solving everybody else's problems, because we're going to have our own, and we're going to have our own things that we have to deal with, and we're going to have work that we have to do for our business. And I think that especially at the beginning, there's all this stuff where you're taught all this networking stuff of like, go like get the numbers up and take all the meetings and do all the things. And it's like, no, start by curating. You will move so much faster if you start by curating. I cannot say that enough.
I see that in a lot of different areas of life, and I will say in sales too, because I'm such an anti-shotgun approach to selling. You know, like I'm going to buy a list of 10,000 people and I'm going to send out these emails. To me, that is just such a waste of time and energy and money. And I always say, like, you'd be better off having 2 or 3 conversations with people who are actually interested in what it is that you do. It'll be better time spent. You'll have more opportunity to earn their business. You know, the other thing too is it also doesn't get into your mindset of like 9,990, 7 people want nothing to do with me. Right.
Yeah.
So I love this idea of curating and the way that you've described it. I think that is so brilliant. Before we wrap up with the little something extra section, I just want to comment here that I found this conversation to be incredibly insightful. I'm so grateful for everything that you shared. Thank you so much. I remember this from the first time that we met too, just the way that you come across and it's just, there's so many gold nuggets in here. I feel like I should break this into like 5 or 6 podcast episodes for people. So I'm going to encourage people to go back and re-listen, because I think that you gave so much just amazing content with structure, with framework, there was so much in there. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to move on to the little something extra section so people get to know you a little bit. What's something that brings you pleasure and or joy in your life right now?
So I recently started doing this again. At the end of the day, I've got 2 little girls, and at the very end of the day, once everybody's sort of finally in bed, because you go through like all the bedtime routine kind of stuff. I do the dishes at the end of the night, and for a while I was sort of listening to podcasts and all these different types of things. And recently I went back to doing what I was doing. Maybe I did this about a year ago, and I just love doing it, where basically I'll listen to like musical theater and Beyonce and all of these like just things that are just like jams. And I will dance in the kitchen, and that just feels like amazing and so much fun. And that's been something I've gotten back into, and it's just a great part to the end of my day.
I love that. I think that is so awesome. All right. Thank you for sharing that. What's something that people are often surprised to learn about you?
I think, it's always interesting. It's like, what is the surprising thing? Because there's so many like different like sort of like nuances and sort of worlds and like that side of things. I think that for some folks, they are surprised to hear that I'm this like big comic book fan, and that I collect these like I collect those like random popcorn tins on like opening nights of Marvel movies. So I've got like an Ant-Man helmet. I've got like, a Thor hammer, all for like popcorn, right? That I'm like this collectible kind of junkie.
I love it.
Is yeah, definitely something that not a lot of folks know. Some of the people who read my stuff know, because I'll write about it sometimes. But yeah, I think that's one of them.
That's really fun to know that about you.
Thanks.
All right. What's something exciting going on in your business right now?
So I started a mastermind probably about a year or so back called Hitmakers. And basically I bring these subject matter experts together and I have them stress test their big ideas, help them develop a framework. And then I have them build what I call a paid for your brain offer, where we look at that framework and we figure out, okay, how could you craft an offer around going through your process and sort of like using your framework. And right now we're in the second half where everybody's putting their offers. They all put their offers into a spreadsheet and they share feedback with each other. And it's so exciting to see just the different changes that people make to an offer when they've got other people looking at it, right? And just being like, oh,
wow.
Well, have you ever thought about that market, or have you ever thought about that pricing? And I just love watching that. It's a really, really fun thing.
So do you launch that once a year, or do you launch it multiple times?
I do it multiple times.
Okay.
Yeah, I do it at like usually roughly every quarter, I'd say, depending on the time of year and sort of holidays and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, roughly about once a quarter, I'll do a round of Hitmakers.
And who are the ideal clients for Hitmakers? Because I feel like people listening are going to be like, I want in on that. Like I want my offer put in the spreadsheet with feedback.
Yeah, so the way that I think about it is that if you want to be somebody who people want to follow, you want to be a triple threat. And that is a combination of a scientist, a celebrity, and a magician. And basically most subject matter experts are scientists. They're really, really good at the work, right? They've figured out sort of how to do great work for their clients and sort of present their stuff. But they haven't necessarily figured out the self-promotion side of it and the relationship building side of it, which is the celebrity piece. And they haven't necessarily figured out how to package that offer and those ideas in such a way that other people are going to want to share it. So in Hitmakers, that's what we do. We bring all of those scientists together and we help them develop those celebrity qualities and those magician qualities so that their ideas and their concepts can get out there. So if there's somebody who's like a subject matter expert and they've got deep subject matter expertise, but they feel like they're not being recognized for that expertise, those are perfect people for Hitmakers. And what I often will say too is if you know somebody where you're like, why don't more people know about you? Hitmakers is the perfect thing for them, because chances are they just don't realize that they're probably 2 or 3 steps away from packaging that brilliance so that they just completely surpass whoever the head is in that industry.
Phenomenal. All right. And so for people listening, what is the best way for people to connect with you?
Sure. They can go to smallpondenterprises.com is the website. They can also go to myreferabilityrater.com if they're curious about sort of how referable they are and they want to kind of see like what are they doing on that side of like really getting their stuff out there and getting their ideas out there. And then they can always reach out to me on LinkedIn, the Book of Faces, any of those social areas. And I'm always happy to say hello and see where I can be helpful.
Awesome. Thank you again, like I said, for being here. I found this conversation incredibly insightful, profound even, and I don't know that I've ever used that word with any of these. So I'm just really impressed and grateful. And for you, the listener, thank you for being here. I hope you found this episode as incredible as I did. I hope you will go back and listen again, because I just think that it is packed full. I'm going to go back and listen probably multiple times because there's so much good stuff in here. And I took a lot of notes while listening. So thank you for being here. I wish you guys continued success, and I will talk to you again soon. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Sales Maven. Visit us online at yoursalesmaven.com/maven for more resources to boost your confidence and skills.
Are you ready to increase your confidence in your sales conversations? I have a gift for you that is going to show you exactly how to do that. It is my Closing the Sale ebook. It's all about leveling up your confidence, giving you language to use, how to seamlessly move somebody through the sales process. And you can get it right now by going to yoursalesmaven.com/Maven. Go grab it.